Welcome to Shrine Bowl week. It is officially the start of draft season, and I'm willing to bet that one or more of these guys ends up in Chicago because there are a lot of really good players here. In last year's practice on this very same field, we had Brock Purdy, we had Isaiah Pacheco, Jelani Woods, Jack Jones, Chig Okonkwo. I mean, there were a lot of goodies in that group, but this year is even better in my opinion, and that's great for all of the Bears scouts that I've seen wandering around here today. As you know, Chicago had a horrifically awful 2022 season that I'm not going to recap here for your own mental health. But things are looking up. They have an absurd amount of cap space, about $100 million in cap space. They have the first overall pick, which they can probably flip for even more picks. And so if I was the GM of a team with quite possibly nowhere to go but up, because it's hard to imagine them being even worse, I'd be pretty excited because I have more toys to play with than everybody else. So that's what we're doing today. I'm going to channel my inner Ryan Poles, and we're going to do our best to put together the most ridiculous Bears mock offseason we possibly can with all this money and all these picks to work with. It's possible, not likely, but possible we can put together a playoff caliber team in just one offseason. So that's what we're going to try to do. Wish me luck. There are two separate phases to this rebuild, like I mentioned before, free agency and the draft. But the first step before anything else kind of involves both of them, and that's what to do with the first overall pick. For me, I am nowhere close to being ready to move off of Justin Fields. I think he's exceptionally talented. I think he's a better quarterback than every other prospect in this class, at least based on potential. So I'm not ready to move off of him. I think a lot of his struggles early in his career are just about supporting cast more than anything, and this whole offseason is about giving him the supporting cast he needs. So I'm not ready to move on yet, and for me, in terms of targeting a team to trade down with, the deepest I'm willing to go is to the fourth overall pick with Indy right now because I want to preserve my ability to most likely get either Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. So the fourth overall pick is about as far as I'm willing to go. And to me, fair compensation for the first overall pick, again, assuming the Colts are desperate and really want a quarterback of their own, I'm going to take that fourth overall pick plus a second and a third this year and next year's first. I know it sounds like a steep price, but quarterbacks, at least in the past, have gone for a lot more than that, and quarterbacks that I don't think were as good as some of the prospects in this year's class. So I think it's a fair deal, and I think Indy would gladly pay it in order to kind of get off of this veteran quarterback carousel that they've been on for half a decade at this point. And so with those picks now in hand, we can move on to the free agency part of this rebuild, which conveniently starts with a trade. That's right, I want to bring Laremy Tunsil to the Chicago Bears. He only has 1 year left on his deal, and his cap hit is monstrous, so he's already a prime candidate for an extension anyway. What I don't know is if Houston is willing to shatter the market for him. Obviously, they are in their own rebuild, and they need more assets. And so, for me, I think it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Laremy gets the money he wants. Houston doesn't have to pay him a deal that maybe they won't be able to afford, considering everything else they also have to spend on, and they don't have as much cap space as Chicago. And they get a whole bunch of picks that they desperately need. Plus, Chicago gets their franchise left tackle so that hopefully Justin Fields doesn't die. So I think it kind of benefits everybody, and I think the compensation of sending next year's first-round pick from the Colts, which has a very good chance of being a top 5 pick, a top 5 pick that, by the way, is going to be in a class where there's a monstrous left tackle prospect from Penn State that's probably going to be worth that pick. So potentially Houston could replace Tunsil long-term with a much cheaper, very talented asset. They just have to rely on the Colts being bad, which is still likely. And also, in addition to that first round pick from next year, I'm also going to send this year's third, which is the 79th overall pick, directly from the Colts, which they got from Washington. On the Chicago side of things, in terms of how this Tunsil extension will be structured, again, remember, we're working with $92 million in cap space, and about $9 million of that is going to have to go to signing the rookie class based on the number of picks they have. So they really have about $83 million left over, at least as of right now, before anybody else gets restructured. And I think we're going to give Tunsil a 4-year extension at $96 million total, $55 guaranteed, with a $30 million signing bonus. And if I did my math right, I think that if we spread out the extension correctly, it'll be about a $15 million cap hit this year. Obviously, that cap hit is going to balloon like crazy later in the deal, but again, at least for now, it should be manageable at about $15 million, which all told, after signing the rookie class, we should have $68 million left. And with that remaining $68 million, I'm thinking we go nose tackle for our next player that we sign. Darren Payne is a fantastic player, a fantastic nose tackle. He does have some pass rush versatility, but really we're bringing him in to stop the run because the Bears' run defense was garbage last year. They just did not have the talent to hold up, and I think Payne is going to help fix that. And luckily, in terms of market-setting deals, the Vita Vea contract in Tampa, which was extremely team-friendly, is kind of the market-setting deal for a nose. So I think 4 years, $72 million, 16 guaranteed, kind of matching that Vita Vea contract as well as its structure, because in terms of structure, a lot of those base salaries later in the deal can be converted to signing bonuses to free up money, at least down the road, even as early as next year. So it's a very team-friendly deal that has a lot of flexibility in terms of how it's managed in the cap. And Payne is a fantastic player that is well worth it. So after we bring him in to help anchor that new and improved run defense, we should have $51 million left over. And with that remaining $51 million, I think we're going to double dip at defensive tackle here in free agency and kind of get as many of the good ones as we possibly can, and also probably hit it in the draft too, because, oh my God, they desperately need as many of them as we could possibly get. Javon Hargrave is now officially on the wrong side of 30, but he's still a fantastic interior pass rusher, and I think he's going to be a great anchor, at least in the short term, for this defensive line. And when they get to third down, he's going to be a monster presence inside for them. I'm planning on giving him a 4-year, $80 million deal, but again, he is an older guy, so it's basically just a 2-year deal because I'm only guaranteeing about $20 million. I know the total of $80 million sounds scary, but it's really not. You can get out of it easily after 2024 if they feel like he's starting to decline, and if not, they can just restructure it if they need to. Based on the structure that I calculated, it would cost them about $10 million this year in cap space, which still leaves us, again, with $41 million, which is a lot of money remaining. And with that $41 million, screw it, let's just keep it rolling. Let's just buy an entire new defensive line just because we can, except this time it's not going to be a DT, it's going to be an edge rusher. I have long been an admirer of Samson Ebukam. I think he's a very underrated pass rusher. He's super consistent, really bendy, tough to block. He's a shorter guy, so it's kind of hard for bigger offensive tackles to handle him. He's just a really, really solid player, and I don't think he's going to break the bank either. I have him going for a 4-year, $65 million deal total, 32 guaranteed, which is pretty much in line with Emmanuel Ogbah, except I think that Ebukam's an even better player than Ogbah. So to me, he's totally worth it. And if we're just kind of giving him the Emmanuel Ogbah deal, the way that was structured was it's again, pretty much a 2-year deal if you need it to be. It's not that bad. And in year 3, you can always kind of convert that base salary into a signing bonus to free up even more space if his cap hit has started to become a problem, but you don't want to release him. I think that there's still a lot of flexibility in the back end of that deal. Again, if we're structuring it the same way as Ogbah. So you're getting him for his late 20s prime. He's a really good player, and his cap hit is probably only going to be about $11 million this year, which is very manageable, which leaves us, again, if you're doing the math, with $30 million still remaining to spend. And with that, we're going to get off of defense for a little bit and finally get Justin Fields some help in free agency. I know we've been kind of focusing on defense, but there is something we can do at free agency to help him again as well, and that's take care of the other tackle position. Kaleb McGary, together with Tevin Jenkins on the right side of that offensive line, will be an absolutely disgusting run-blocking combination. Those two are both just fantastic run blockers. McGary himself might be the best run-blocking right tackle in the entire league. So I think he is well worth this investment. I'm going to give him an extension that slightly exceeds Taylor Moton's deal, which was signed a couple years ago now. So he gets 5 years, $90 million, 44 guaranteed, which I know is a huge number. And at least for me, I'm going to be trying to front load this thing a little bit more than Carolina did with Moton. So we're going to plan for a cap hit that's even bigger than Tunsil because I don't want both these tackles to balloon at the same time. So this cap hit up front is going to be $20 million this year in order to try to save some space down the line. Again, I don't want to to have like $80 million in cap hits for offensive tackles in 3 years. So this one's going to hit a little bit earlier out of necessity, but that's okay because McGary is a really, really good player, and I think that he would fit wonderfully in Chicago. So with both offensive tackles shored up in March and the defensive line mostly rebuilt in March, that leaves us with $10 million more remaining in wiggle room, which I don't plan on spending right now, and I kind of want to preserve that wiggle room just in case we need it down the line. I'm not going to run us all the way to zero on the balance sheet. We already got a whole bunch of good players. We did our jobs. And so from there, from that position of strength, we go to the draft. One quick moment before we get to all that mock draft goodness, I do want to thank our partners over at Factor for helping to make this episode possible in the first place, because this time of year is extraordinarily chaotic. If you're not familiar with the football media calendar, this is pretty much when the actual NFL season and draft season collide. So we're covering conference championship games and Super Bowls and Pro Bowls and Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl all at the same time, and we pretty much don't have time to feed ourselves. And that's where Factor comes in, because all their meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in under 2 minutes, which again is great for us because taking a half hour to actually cook something seems impossible right now. And all of the food is legitimately great. The menus are updated weekly and include 27 plus meal options and 33 plus add-on options. You can choose your favorite meals, or you can let Factor craft your order for you depending on your preferences and tastes. Again, everything is extremely fresh and really delicious. Like, I want to emphasize, this is not just a normal quote-unquote microwavable meal. Like, this is actually good food. And that makes a difference when we're working anywhere from 60 to 90 hours on any given week at this time of the year, and it's just... You just want good food, right? So Factor is one of my favorite partners because of that, because it's something that I use myself every single month, and I have for well over a year now, and I'm probably going to keep using it forever. So if you guys want to try out Factor for yourself as well and see if you like it as much as I do, you can go to factor75.com and use code FilmRoom60 and you'll get 60% off your first Factor box. Again, that is factor75.com, promo code FilmRoom60 for 60% off your order. Thank you again to Factor for sponsoring this week's show and everything else that you guys have sponsored in the past. Love working with you people. And with that, let's get back to this show. With the 4th overall pick, we're taking Jalen Carter from Georgia, who might be the best player in this entire draft class. He just happens to play defensive tackle, so he might go a little bit lower than 1st overall, but he is a ridiculous talent in pretty much every sense of the word. Against the run, against the pass, I mean, he's incredibly strong and agile and flexible, and his burst is just insane. He's ridiculous, and I know some people would be confused. You know, why are we spending another premium asset on 3 technique? We just bought a really expensive one in free agency. Again, if you paid attention to that section, it's basically a 2-year deal. It's not really a 4-year deal. We're just trying to get through the next couple years of the Justin Fields experience and give him as much support as possible. So I'd rather have Hargrave and Carter on the field on 3rd down, and then in a couple years, when we inevitably let Hargrave go, Carter naturally steps in as the long-term solution, and he's probably more talented than any other 3 technique they would get in a couple of years. So I would rather have that answer already in-house. And you know what? Putting them both on the field at the same time is still a pretty damn fun combination. So for me, just take the best player. That's Jalen Carter, and, you know, sleep better at night. I'm okay with that. From there, we're going to skip directly past pick 32 because we traded it away for Chase fucking Claypool, but that's okay. We still got the 35th pick when we traded back with the Colts, so we still have a presence in the top of the 2nd round to get yet another receiver who's probably way better. Zay Flowers is our first appearance of a Shrine Bowl player on this list, and definitely not the last, because there's, again, a lot of really good players here, but Zay Flowers is the best. He is an utterly absurd receiver. Like, he wins every single rep. He's got legit 4.3 speed. He's a phenomenal route runner. His releases against press coverage are just lightning quick. And I know that when I put out my comparison on Twitter of Antonio Brown, it seemed super lofty, but I mean, how could you watch him and not see Antonio Brown? He looks exactly like him, like in terms of play style, in terms of everything. Build, he's literally AB 2.0 in the good ways, not the really shitty ways. And I know that he's trained with Antonio in the past, so maybe he took a lot from his game, but he's a ridiculous receiver prospect. I would give anything for him to be a Chicago Bear. I would say there's only a 40% chance he's even here at pick 35. I'm probably just penciling him into New England like right now. They're coaching him here at the Shrine Bowl and they're obsessed with him. So he's probably not going to be here, but in my headcanon, he is. And so I'm drafting him because, you know what, it's my video. Fuck you, I'm allowed to. But yeah, Zay Flowers, really, really good player. From there, let's get to the other second round pick that we got from a trade. And that's going to be from the Ravens at 56th overall. We're getting more offensive line help for Justin Fields here. John Michael Schmitz is he is the best zone center in this draft. I know the Bears lean a lot on the zone run game, both outside zone and inside zone, and John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota is fantastic in both. He's a solid, not great, but solid pass protector, but really, I'm drafting him for what he brings to the run game because that's what we're going to be leaning on the most. And in terms of his ability to kind of get out of his stance, lightning quick, and like reach block a nose or reach block even a 3 technique sometimes, like he's athletically gifted enough to do that. He's a very, very good player. And at center, I think in this system, center is a lot more important position than I think people give it credit for. They call it the pivot for a reason because everything turns around center in a zone-based running system. If you don't have a good one, you just kind of lose. And so I'm really doubling down at center here. I want to make sure that, you know, if Lucas Patrick gets hurt, we can throw somebody in there and have really high quality center play. And then eventually when Patrick moves on, Schmitz can be the full-time starter, you know, for the next hopefully 8 to 10 years. But he's a very, very solid player, a perfect fit for this system. And hopefully he's a Chicago Bear in a couple months. And with that, let's get to the third round at pick 65 overall. By the time this comes out, I'm sure a lot of you will have heard of Xavier Hutchinson because I expect him to completely tear up the Senior Bowl, which is going to be going on during this week. It's the same week as Shrine Bowl. I don't know why they're at the same time. I don't make the schedule, but Xavier Hutchinson, to me, is going to be the Zay Flowers of the Senior Bowl, and that I think he's the best receiver there. He's a phenomenal route runner, just effortlessly smooth. He's got more juice than I think people give him credit for. I know some people think he's going to time in the 4.5s, which is possible, but I think his short area burst is really special. He's good after the catch. He catches everything. His drop rate's like 5%, which is a really low drop rate. You know, players like DeAndre Hopkins and Larry Fitzgerald have been at like 3.5% before. So 5% is pretty low. And just looking at his overall combination of size and short area burst and route running ability and ball skills and smoothness and yak ability, all that kind of stuff, I just think he's a really solid player. I think he could eventually be like a high-end wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 in this offense. You know, similar type of ceiling to Darnell Mooney, just a different skill set. But in terms of overall role, he's a very high-quality complementary player. And if Zay Flowers turns into the true number 1 that I think he can maybe be, I think having a young core of Flowers with a little bit of Claypool and a lot of bit of Mooney, and then eventually, you know, mixing in Hutchinson, that's a pretty good group of weapons for Justin Fields, and he desperately needs that. So I'm willing to spend as many picks as it takes to just get this wide receiving core right. And you know what? We're still not done because we're skipping over pick 79. We traded that away for Laremy Tunsil, and we're going all the way down to the 4th round now at their next pick at 103 overall. Like I said, we're still not done with receiver. I'm going to draft as many as it takes to get a good receiving core. I will pour endless resources into this, and A.T. Perry is somebody who I think is really worth those resources. He's 6'5", but does not play like it, and in that way, I mean, he's more fluid than you think a 6'5" receiver should be. He's got really good feet and hips for somebody his size, obviously has the ball skills of somebody who's 6'5". You know, again, not the greatest long speed, but the short area burst is really, really good for somebody who's just kind of as long and lanky as he is. And I can live with Perry not having 4.3 or 4.4 speed as long as he's still leveraging that length and body control and size to his advantage, which he really does. Again, just like Flowers and Hutchinson, it's possible that he's not here at 103 overall when the draft actually comes. I just don't really see anybody talking about him, and I see, most people valuing him somewhere, late day 3 right now, and I think that's just way too low. I think he's a much better player than that. I think he's going to be a top 100 pick, and hopefully, if all goes to plan, it's going to be in Chicago. And speaking of guys who I think could very easily be top 100 picks and break my heart by not falling to the Bears in the 4th round, let's talk about one of the freakiest edge prospects that I have ever seen, and he happens to be right here, again, at the Shrine Bowl. I want you to understand properly how rare of an athlete BJ Thompson is. He's 6'5", 250 plus, jumps 40 inches, has 11.3 in the broad, at least that's what he's been jumping in training. And even though he's been clocked in the past at 4.56, when we sat down with him and interviewed him for the podcast, which if you're not subscribed, by the way, Bootleg Football Podcast is my podcast channel with my partner EJ Snyder. We're here at the Shrine Bowl together, and we interviewed him after practice, and he told us he's running 4.4, which is, you know what? Believable. If you watch him live and you see him on tape, he is unreal as a physical marvel. His first step is probably one of, if not the best in this class. He has insane bend for his size. He's got the length. He has everything. I mean, I was even seeing him drop. They were doing linebacker drills with him to see if he can drop in coverage. And he does have experience playing DB in the past. I believe he was a corner in high school at 6'5". I mean, my God, he's just ridiculous. But anyway, I was watching him do these drills when he was dropping in coverage, and he moves like a DB, and he's 6'5", 250 plus. He's insane. There is no comparison for him in terms of physical ability. He has a long way to go as a player. He still doesn't entirely know what he's doing as a pass rusher. He doesn't really rush with a plan a lot of the times, but you give him a good defensive line coach, somebody like Chris Kasurek with the Niners, right? Somebody who has a history of taking, balls of clay and just molding them into pass rush monsters. You put him with that type of coach, and I think that he could be like another Danielle Hunter type story, where he goes in day 3, and then he turns into one of the very best edge players in the entire league. Will he actually make it to the Bears at pick 134? I have no idea. I really hope he does, but there is legit buzz building for him. And so for now, while everybody else that I've been seeing online is ranking him, somewhere in the 5th to 6th round, I'm going to capitalize on that and just pretend that he's available and take him in the 4th. And from there, we're going to go to the 5th round now and keep it once more with the Shrine Bowl with another player who has really caught my eye this week and somebody who I think fits the Bears perfectly, and that's Chandler Zavala from NC State. Zavala has experience playing tackle and guard on both sides of the line, so I love his flexibility, and at least early on, because of that flexibility, I think he's kind of the ideal young swing guard for Chicago, or potentially even a starter down the line at left guard, opposite Tevin Jenkins. And I think that he kind of plays very similarly to Tevin Jenkins at guard, where it's just unbelievably physical, nasty. And I hear him talking a lot of shit at practice too. He actively hates the concept of defense, which I love in an offensive lineman. He's really funny. A great interview, by the way. And if you go watch that interview over on the podcast channel, which is going to be out sometime this coming week, I assume. We talked a lot of ball with him in terms of how he makes adjustments on those zone runs that NC State runs against different types of fronts and how things change based on the technique of the defensive lineman. He's a really, really smart guy. And for me personally, I really love smart, nasty, tough, physical offensive linemen that can play both sides. That just kind of checks every single box for me. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to be there in the 5th round, but I don't see a whole lot of people mocking him higher than that. So we'll see where he kind of ends up when the draft actually happens. But at least for now, I'm just going to accept the value and take him in the 5th round. We're going back to Mobile with this one. Tyjae Spears, by the time this comes out, he probably has a lot of clips on Twitter of him absolutely destroying everybody at the Senior Bowl. He's exceptionally explosive as, probably a third down back in the league. He's not super big. He's about 195, I think 5'10". So he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's just so damn fast and explosive and almost impossible to cover in space. So I think he's a natural third down back that I would not be afraid to give some carries to. Like he's a really tough runner. He's just not super big. So I think as a really high upside rotational running back that I could put on third down and be pretty confident that he's going to win against pretty much anybody he's matched up against, I really love Tyjae Spears as a 5th round pick. As for where he is going to go in the actual draft, I hear some people say he's going to be a 4th round pick. Some say he's going to be a 6th round pick. The people that really love him think he's going to be Kamara and get taken in the 3rd round. I have no idea. Running backs that aren't necessarily 3 down backs can kind of go all over the place. So I'm just going to sit in the middle and have him as a 5th round pick, but I just think he's a really fun player and exactly what the Bears need to kind of complement their current stable of backs. I just love the kid and I really want him in Chicago. All right, last pick of this Bears mock off season, and this is one of my favorites. He only caught my radar a couple weeks ago when I saw a clip on Twitter, and then I did a lot more digging and a lot more tape watching, and pretty much immediately fell in love, and that's Noah Gindorf, the tight end from North Dakota State. My best comp for him is a moose. He's 6'6", 270, and looks every bit of 270, to the point where, if you get him on the run with the ball in his hands, DBs will straight up bounce off of him. It's like they're getting hit by a car, I swear to God. He's just so big, so physically imposing, and moves a lot better than you would think for a guy who's 6'6", 270. It's possible that he doesn't go this late because he is more talented than a typical 7th round pick, but he's also coming off a fairly major injury that's going to cost him most of the pre-draft process, if not the entire pre-draft process. So I don't think we're going to get any sort of testing numbers on him. I think we're just getting medicals and interviews, and that's about it. But if you just watch the tape and you see the physical skill set, you can see why he's going to be drafted. I hope his pro destination is Chicago, obviously. That's why I'm picking him here. But in the real draft, whichever fan base gets a hold of him, I think is going to love him. He's got a great skill set, and in my opinion, he'll be a fan favorite. So again, to recap this entire draft class that I put together, at the 4th overall pick, we got Jalen Carter, the DT from Georgia. In the 2nd round, we took Zay Flowers, the receiver from Boston College, and John Michael Schmitz, the center from Minnesota. In the 3rd round, we took Xavier Hutchinson, the wide receiver from Iowa State. In the 4th round, we took A.T. Perry, the receiver from Wake Forest, as well as B.J. Thompson, the edge from Stephen F. Austin. In the 5th round, we took Chandler Zavala, the offensive guard from NC State, as well as Tyjae Spears, the running back from Tulane. And in the 7th round, we took Noah Gindorf, the tight end out of North Dakota State. It's been 3 days since I recorded all that, and I realized I didn't actually record an outro, so we're doing that here today from the Raiders practice facility. That's where the last practices for Shrine Bowl are taking place, and it's a really gorgeous facility. It's like a friggin' palace in here. And then they're setting up the Pro Bowl Skills Challenge as well. I think this is the dodgeball court that I'm recording this from. I just tried to find the first spot I could and ended up in the Pro Bowl. But anyway, if you guys are a Bears fan, I want to get your feedback on this mock off season. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. And if you're interested in learning about more of these prospects, especially the ones here at Shrine Bowl, we did interviews with, I think, all of them mentioned here today over on the Bootleg Football podcast. So if you want to kind of get to know them on a really deep level, breaking down tape with them, learning how they read the game, learning different drills they do, go over to the Bootleg Football podcast. We're going to have interviews, as we're cutting up the tape and everything like that. Interviews going up over the next few weeks over there. And they're all really good. Some of the best stuff we've ever done. So, with that, I'm going to go to Falcons practice and, watch Arthur Smith and company do their thing. And then I'm going to go sleep for a week before I go to the Super Bowl and do all this over again. So with that, love you all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.